Tonight on Primetime, the White House Correspondents Dinner is one of Washington's most high-profile nights, where politics, media, and power gather under one roof. But this year, the annual event was cut short by a major security scare, triggering fresh questions about how vulnerable even America's most protected spaces have become. In Washington, even one shot changes everything. Welcome to the program. I'm AnewZ. A major security scare in Washington has cut short one of the capital's highest-profile political gatherings. At around 8:35 on Saturday night, gunfire erupted outside the White House Correspondents Dinner, forcing President Donald Trump and hundreds of guests from the venue after an armed suspect tried to breach the security perimeter.
Gunfire caused panic at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington, D.C., forcing the evacuation of U.S. President Donald Trump and hundreds of attendees. The incident unfolded Saturday night at the Washington Hilton, where the annual event was taking place. Officials say a man armed with a shotgun, handgun, and multiple knives attempted to breach a security checkpoint near the ballroom. Law enforcement intervened within seconds, and the suspect was taken into custody. During the confrontation, a Secret Service agent was shot at close range, but a bulletproof vest prevented serious injury. The agent is reported to be in good condition. Witnesses described hearing several loud bangs before security personnel rushed in, shouting for guests to take cover. The FBI confirmed its National Capital Response Squad responded to the scene and says the suspect is in custody. Authorities believe he acted alone and say there is no ongoing threat to the public. Speaking afterwards, Trump praised the swift response of law enforcement and confirmed the event will be rescheduled within 30 days.
It's always shocking when something like this happens. Happened to me a little bit, and that never changes. The fact we were sitting right next to each other, First Lady on my right, and I heard a noise and sort of thought it was a tray. I thought it was a tray going down. You know, I've heard that many times, and it was a pretty loud noise. And it was from quite far away. He hadn't breached the area at all. They really got him. But so it was quite far away, but it was a gun.
Police identified the suspect as a 31-year-old man from California. He is expected to face multiple charges, including using a firearm during a violent crime and assaulting a federal officer. The White House Correspondents' Dinner, a major annual gathering of politicians, journalists and celebrities, was cancelled for the evening following the incident.
Witnesses have expressed their account of the event and shared what they saw and heard as the incident unfolded.
Witnesses described moments of confusion and fear as gunshots rang out during the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington. Attendees reported hearing several shots in quick succession near the lobby.
Yeah, I was in the lower lobby there, and right before the escalator that goes down, and we heard 3 shots back to back, pop, 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 and I bolted for the door. I didn't even wait to see, like, you know, what was going on behind me. I just heard it, and it sounded like it was behind me, so I ran out.
Man, we were sitting there, and all of a sudden we heard a few loud bangs, and it's hard to tell immediately, but then a bunch of people came sprinting into the room, and we saw everybody getting rushed out, Donald Trump first.
Others described uncertainty in the moments after the shots were heard.
I was in the bathroom when I heard 6 or 7 shots ring. I'm not sure exactly. And what was going through my head was that I thought those were gunshots, but I could not be certain. And when a woman from the security services, either from the hotel or law enforcement, not sure exactly, she confirmed that those were gunshots and that we should shelter in place.
Outside the venue, attendees gathered on nearby streets as police secured the area, with many still trying to process what had happened.
Well, joining me now is Dr. Mark Merowitz, a professor at State University of New York Maritime College, where he teaches American foreign policy, constitutional law, and political history. He's also a lawyer and a longtime commentator on U.S. politics and international affairs. Welcome, Mark. Great to have you on the program. Now, when you see violence this close to the president, what does that tell us about the current political mood in America?
Well, it's certainly very, very disturbing, especially the manifesto that this guy put together. But at the same time, I think the takeaway I have also is the president's poise during this whole thing. It's quite remarkable. He was very calm. He was very poised. He wanted to go back and give his talk. He made a press conference within 1 hour after the event or so. And I think that's absolutely remarkable. I don't know anybody else who could really do that. I think he showed leadership and he showed calm to the people, quite in distinction to the, as you say, the kind of polarized environment that we have. But I mean, I don't, reading the manifesto and all that, I don't really want to emphasize that and give that assassin, credit for anything. He's a thug, a criminal, and he committed a criminal act against the president. It's horrible. Yet at the same time, it gives us pause. Two things. Number one, the kind of rhetoric that's in our culture today, and secondly, the security lapse that clearly is apparent. And I'm no security expert, but how in the world does a guy come across the country on a train, goes to a hotel, checks in, brings weapons, and then goes downstairs to a meeting which has not only the president but the vice president and the cabinet? And even that is very surprising, because having been a corporate lawyer and a general counsel of a company, absolutely never was the CEO of the company allowed to be in the same place as the chief operating officer, chief financial officer. So how is it that they put everybody in the same room? The whole thing is just, you scratch your head in amazement as kind of how they approach this. But especially in the environment, putting that point to the moment needs to be investigated. But at the same time, the rhetoric out there is very, very disturbing. It is disturbing. There's no question about it. But again, my takeaway is seeing the president being calm and poised. That was meaningful.
Well, Mark, in that vein, on account of that sharp rhetoric that you mentioned in America, politics in the country feels more, at least to the outside viewer, more angry, more divided, more personal than it has in years. Is this where that kind of climate can lead?
Well, look, you said I teach history, and yeah, look, if you look at American history, I've had many, many divisive periods. Just can finish talking about the period before the Civil War, extremely divisive, where even a congressman came to the Senate and caned a senator. I mean, things like this have gone on in this country. But I do think that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, made a very good point, where he basically said, if we want to disagree with each other, let's disagree on policy, but let's keep out this divisive and hateful rhetoric. And I think everybody should be on board. Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrats, the Republicans, Mike Johnson, I think they're all seeing what this rhetoric can lead to. And the other thing that was very interesting about this is that the whole journalistic press corps was in that room. And I think they finally got an appreciation of how difficult and impactful and problematic and just being president of the United States, how risky it is to be president. I think they learned something, and hopefully they'll take away from it. I think hopefully, even if they're opponents, many of our liberal media, of the president, maybe they will come away with some kind of begrudging admiration for Donald Trump, who basically showed that equanimity, calm, and he was a leader, and he basically said, I want to go back and I want to do my show. And then he gives a press conference. Wow, that's something to admire and to watch, and I think is very, very important. So I hope we just don't go on the next couple of days and go back to the same old rhetoric, Trump this, Trump that, against Trump. Maybe a few nice words about him would be appropriate. Being president is a very hard job, especially you see that the press corps saw it directly straight up in that room on Saturday night.
Well, with so many staunch allies and supporters and fierce opponents, Donald Trump remains one of the most divisive figures in American politics. Would you say things like these rally support around him, or maybe deepen public exhaustion?
Well, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. I think that it was a traumatic event, no question about it. I think that we have midterm elections coming in November. Then we're going to see if this has any effect. I don't know that it has a tremendous political effect. But the problem is that if we're going to just go back to business as usual, to this kind of ad hominem personal attacks against the president, then we've actually gone nowhere. We've got to create an atmosphere where we're debating issues and not attacking people personally. I mean, again, to this manifesto, it's disgusting. The way, this manifesto, it's repulsive, disgusting. Also, the way it gets all this publicity out there. Why give publicity to this maniac who did this? This is atrocious to have this in this country. And I don't think that this maniac's manifesto is indicative of what people are feeling. He's not a public relations representative. He's an assassin and a maniac. So, giving all this attention to him, which they do on the 24/7 cable news and all around the world, and, with all due respect to your network and all the networks, it's news. But at the same time, we need to dampen down the rhetoric and dampen down the political attacks, which have really created a bad atmosphere. Whether that bad atmosphere created this event is something that, it's imponderable. One does not know. But it's also interesting to note, this is the same hotel where Ronald Reagan was attacked back in his administration, the same hotel. So, regretfully, as President Trump said, being president is a very risky job. But I think some kudos to the president for how he handled it. I think he handled it marvelously, and he should be commended for it. He's quite courageous.
Well, Mark, some might say that repeated threats against a president reflect growing hostility towards him personally. Would you say that's fair, or is that maybe an oversimplification?
I think it's oversimplification because, we had Squeaky Fromme, who was a Manson family member, and she had a threat against President Ford. We had, the assassination of Garfield by another maniac who wanted a job as an ambassador. We've had this in our history. But these kinds of political violence occur also all over the world. These kind of things happen everywhere. Why is that? Well, I think another aspect to look at might be social media and our communication, and the fact that the 24/7 news cycle, the CNNs, the MS Nows, and all that have recycled all of this rhetoric over and over again. Even the manifesto from this lunatic. In other words, I think that we need to kind of pay some attention to what we put out there to the public and how we communicate. It's not a good look for America, and it's not a good look for the world. This whole world is very much in turmoil. We have wars going on. We have all these things going on. And at the same time, we have an assassination attempt. Gee whiz. That's horrendous. And I think everybody of every political stripe will agree that this is absolutely, totally unacceptable, and it's irrelevant what people think politically about the president. There's no excuse for it. It's totally unacceptable, and we need to dampen down the rhetoric, for sure, either way. But something like this is out of the pale, totally unacceptable, and not within it. It's not a debatable point whether Trump was good, bad, or indifferent. In no way should a president be threatened in this way. It's unacceptable. And every political element in this country and in the world should agree with that. That's not a debatable point at all.
Following this incident, would you say that anything might change politically in the country? You've mentioned the midterms coming up. Would you say the focus might now shift from those policy battles to something bigger, more significant, the stability of the political system itself?
Well, I say this, okay? America has the longest standing republic in history. Our founders were geniuses. They put together checks and balances, separation of powers. Our system has been maintained. But Benjamin Franklin's point when he was at the Constitutional Convention, when he was asked, "What are you doing over there?" and he answered, "Well, we're making a republic if you can keep it." Well, we need to keep it, meaning we need to have civic and civil dialogue. We cannot have this kind of hateful dialogue out there. If you don't like a particular policy, that's fine, but you don't direct personal attacks and rhetoric against individual politicians. And we need to start doing that, because if we don't, we're not going to be able to keep our republic. But I think we've kept it this long, despite all kinds of challenges. And I do believe that we're going to keep it for a very long time to come. I think America is a great experiment and they're successful, but we do have these kinds of disturbing events, and we need to back them, and we need to do better in the future.
Mark, thank you so much for coming on Primetime and sharing your insight and analysis.
It's a pleasure.
All right, after a short break, we will be taking a look at the top business stories of the day with Katie Wilson. Don't go away.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome to AnewZ, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabon. One important note to fears. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are recording the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent,
Almaty, Kazakhstan,
Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for AnewZ.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Let's now cross over to Katie Wilson, who has the top business stories of the day. Katie, what have you got for us tonight?
Yeah, so the fallout from the conflict with Iran is still filtering through to oil and energy markets, so we'll have more on that and the latest from the Beijing Auto Show. So first this evening, oil prices are climbing again as stalled US-Iran peace talks raise fears of fresh disruption to Middle East supplies. Brent crude has hit a 3-week high, fueling inflation concerns, whilst global stocks hold steady ahead of a pivotal week for markets.
Oil climbed on Monday while stocks held steady ahead of a busy week of tech earnings. Investors believed US-Iran peace talks signalled more disruption in Middle East energy exports. Benchmark Brent crude futures rose more than 2% to touch a 3-week high of $108 a barrel in Asian trade. The higher prices have led to inflation worries and seen traders price out rate cuts in developed markets this year. Middle East energy was hit by the conflict in Iran after US-Israeli strikes on the country 2 months ago, with markets focused on the crucial Strait of Hormuz. The outlook for peace is uncertain. US President Donald Trump said Iran only had to call if it wanted to negotiate an end to the war. Outside of oil, chip stocks rose on renewed excitement about AI spending ahead of a week with tech earnings reports. Intel's forecast last week for second quarter revenue beat Wall Street expectations and set off the latest round of buying. South Korean shares hit records on the chipmaker rally, while Japan's Nikkei closed above the key 60,000 mark for the first time. Europe's Stock 600 dipped slightly in early trade. US tech earnings are due in the coming week from giants like Apple, Alphabet and Microsoft. Major central bank decisions are also due around the world in the coming week, with investors betting rates are likely to stay on hold.
Well, as the fallout from the Iran war continues to impact industries worldwide, there are signs of a rebound in Europe's steel sector. Higher energy costs and disrupted global trade have pushed up prices and boosted competitiveness for EU producers, even as the wider economic outlook remains uncertain.
After over half a dozen muted earnings seasons, steelmakers in the EU are set for a rebound. Though demand has not recovered to 2022 levels, steel prices have increased faster than expected in recent months. It's thanks to higher energy prices and diminishing imports from outside the bloc due to the EU's new safeguards. European hot-rolled oil prices have gained about 20% in the past 6 months. According to LSEG data, EU steelmakers are almost all expected to post higher first-quarter profits compared to the same period last year. Despite the conflict increasing uncertainty, it seems to have made European steelmakers more competitive. Analysts say higher shipping costs have helped regionalise the steel market, and buying behaviour has seen a change in Europe. Still, questions linger. Following the flare-up in the Middle East, the World Steel Association in April trimmed its 2026 forecast for steel demand in the EU and Britain from 3.2% to 1.3%, and that will likely weigh down the recovery. Energy also remains a concern. Bank of America warned in a note that European steelmakers face industrial power prices more than 50% higher than their Chinese and Indian rivals, and more than twice those of US producers.
While corporate America is also feeling the strain, Procter & Gamble warns surging oil prices could knock around $1 billion off profits next year as higher energy costs ripple through packaging and transport.
Procter & Gamble on Friday warned of a roughly $1 billion hit to its profit over its next fiscal year due to surging oil prices. That's among the highest profit losses for any company due to the Iran war outside of airlines, which rely heavily on oil for fuel. P&G's estimated profit hit, projected for its fiscal year starting in July, accounts for oil prices jumping from $60 a barrel before the Middle East conflict to around $100 today. The consumer goods giant said that will impact plastics and paper for packaging, as well as transportation charges. While P&G on a post-earnings call said it was well-placed to manage the challenges, the company's finance chief noted that, quote, $1 billion after tax is nothing to sneeze at from a headwind standpoint. The company is the latest to join a host of global firms flagging significant cost pressures from the Iran war. European rival Nestle has warned of higher costs due to the Strait of Hormuz blockade, while Beiersdorf, maker of Nivea, is considering price hikes later this year if commodity costs continue to rise. A Reuters review of statements from 172 companies since the start of the Iran war showed 24 of them have either withdrawn or cut their outlook, while 35 have signaled price hikes, and another 35 companies have warned of a financial hit from the conflict. As for P&G's quarterly results, the company did beat sales and earnings estimates, sending its shares up as much as 5% in Friday trading.
Now, to a little closer to home, for me at least. Teesside is emerging as a surprise winner in the global AI boom. Across the UK, developers are scrambling to convert disused industrial land into data centres as tech giants ramp up spending on AI infrastructure. It's reshaping land values and driving a surge in demand for power and grid connections.
This land was left dormant after the decline of the chemical industry in northeastern England. But it has gained new lustre with the boom of AI. Blessed with power plants, water and a grid connection, the former petrochemical site has just what it takes to house a top AI data centre campus. That's what CEO of Semcorp UK, Mike Patrick, hopes. His firm owns the Wilton International site in northeast England's Teesside.
Data centres are becoming more relevant in the UK. Although we suffer with some of the highest energy prices in the UK, then there's still a requirement.
Across Britain, owners of industrial sites, property developers and even farmers are racing to cash in on the billions of dollars tech giants plan to spend on AI data centres. Data shows plans for 119 data centres have been submitted. Sites are as varied as an old paint factory, a Travelodge hotel and a retail centre near Heathrow Airport. Patrick said regions like the North East have had a surge in desirability in the tech industry.
With the evolution of AI and the need for big power, big learning data centres, the proximity to London is not quite as relevant. But with AI, the latency, so the speed at which you need to process and transfer data back and forward isn't as important. Therefore, regions like ours, which are still really well connected, become relevant in the data centre world.
Momentum grew last year after King Charles hosted a banquet with Donald Trump and tech bosses. Companies including Google, Microsoft and Nvidia all pledged to invest billions in Britain's digital infrastructure. Experts said the AI gold rush has spawned a whole new industry around data centre wannabes. It's upended.
To the auto industry now, and Porsche has agreed to sell its stakes in sports car maker Bugatti to a consortium led by a US fund linked to Egypt's Sawiris family. The move comes as the German car maker reviews its strategy after a sharp fall in profits and weakening demand in key markets.
Porsche has agreed to sell its stake in sports car makers Bugatti and Rimac to a consortium led by a US fund linked to Egypt's billionaire Sawiris family. The companies announced the news on Friday. Porsche will divest its 45% stake in Bugatti Rimac, the joint venture set up in 2021, as well as a 20.6% stake in Rimac Group to a consortium led by US-based HOF Capital. Reuters reported in 2022 that Croatia's Rimac had a valuation of over $2.3 billion. Bugatti Rimac, meanwhile, has a reported valuation of over $1 billion. Porsche and Rimac both declined to comment on the valuation. Porsche has been reviewing its strategy after group margins fell sharply, and it reported a 93% slump in operating profit last year. The company was squeezed by US tariffs and falling demand in China.
And finally, with all these moves in the car industry, attention is turning to China's rapidly advancing EV sector. At the Beijing Auto Show, an American YouTuber says viewers across the pond are increasingly asking why they can't buy Chinese cars as fascination grows over their features and their prices.
American YouTuber Ethan Robertson has his hands full at the Beijing Auto Show on Friday. He's giving more than a dozen foreign visitors a first-hand look at Chinese high-tech cars. Robertson is the co-founder of YouTube channel Wheelsboy, which specializes in Chinese cars for English-speaking audiences. The North Carolina native who lives in China said the perception of Chinese cars among U.S. viewers has changed in the 6 years he has been covering the industry.
We have a very diverse and international audience, but our largest portion of our audience online is Americans. And I would say that Americans' response in general to Chinese cars is, why can't I buy this? Our comment section is full of people saying things like, I can't believe the government won't allow them to sell this car in my country. It's so cheap, it's so high tech, it seems so nice.
The prices are a big reason why his largely American audience react with a mix of fascination and frustration.
So you're looking at a car that's maybe $30,000 US, as you said, and that car is fully equipped with a 6-seat SUV with an extended range powertrain, a refrigerator, a TV in the back, giant screens, and again, it's $30,000. Whereas in places like the United States, unfortunately, the market, $30,000 barely gets you into any electric vehicle or hybrid at that price point.
Lei Xing, who hosts the China EVs and More podcast, is hopeful that Chinese cars will eventually reach American shores.
Depending on what the Trump summit, what the outcome of that is, I think we could see this narrative go into a different direction. But long term, like I said, it's a matter of time. If it's not by 2028, it could be by 2030, it could be in the 2030s. I know in my life, I'm going to be able to buy a Chinese EV in the US.
That's your business news. It's so interesting this, is in the UK I never see Chinese cars, whereas when I came here to Baku, you see them all the time. Is it the same for you?
Come to think of it, Katie, I did not see that many from where I hail from in the Balkans, but I do know, however, that a major brand started selling in Bosnia this month. Anyway, great selection as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, after a short break, we'll be taking a look at why diplomacy between the United States and Iran is stalling and what that could mean for the wider region. Do stay with us.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Shaken to its very foundation.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. AnewZ is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on AnewZ.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Uncertainty is growing over efforts to revive diplomacy between the United States and Iran, with both sides appearing to pull back from direct engagement. As rhetoric hardens and negotiations remain stalled, hopes of a breakthrough are fading, and the risk of wider escalation is back in focus. Here's more.
US President Donald Trump said he will no longer send delegations abroad to meet Iranian officials. Speaking to Fox News in an interview, he said Tehran should contact Washington directly if it is serious about negotiations. Trump also stressed that Iran must not develop a nuclear weapon, calling it a non-negotiable condition for any future talks.
If they want to talk, they can come to us or they can call us. You know, there is a telephone. We have nice secure lines, although I'm not sure any telephone line is secure, frankly, but we have secure lines, and if they want, we can talk. But we're not sending people to travel 18 hours to meet where you literally think of this. We had a meeting for Tuesday, and it was on Saturday that I was saying, when are we meeting? Tuesday, because it's so far. So great respect for Pakistan, but I will, because they've been terrific. They've really tried, and they'll stay involved. But we're going to do it by telephone. So if they want, they can call us.
On the Iranian side, President Masoud Pezeshkian criticized Washington's approach. He said continued pressure, including sanctions and what he described as hostile actions, is weakening trust. According to his office, these measures are making it harder to create the right conditions for diplomacy. At the same time, Iran's Foreign Minister Sayed Abbas Araghchi has been actively engaging with regional partners. During recent visits, including trips to Islamabad and Oman, he conveyed Iran's position through diplomatic channels. Reports from Iranian media say he delivered written messages outlining Tehran's red lines. These conditions are said to focus on Iran's nuclear program and strategic waterways, including the Strait of Hormuz, a key global oil route.
Iran is stepping up its diplomatic outreach at a critical moment, with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in St. Petersburg for talks with Russian officials as regional tensions grow. The visit comes as ceasefire efforts remain fragile and diplomacy with Washington stays stalled. Turaj Shiralilu has more on that from Tehran.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrived in St. Petersburg on Monday after visiting Pakistan and Oman for discussions on bilateral ties as well as regional developments, including the shaky ceasefire, Hormuz Strait standoff, and stalled talks with the United States. Meantime, local news media affiliated to the Revolutionary Guards reported that over the weekend it delivered Tehran's messages to mediator Pakistan to be conveyed to U.S. officials on a deal to end military conflict and reopen the strategic waterway, but postponed the talks on Iran's nuclear program. In comments broadcast on state IRIB TV, Araghchi said he's visiting Russia to meet senior officials and to continue close consultations between Tehran and Moscow on bilateral, regional, and international issues. Iran's top diplomat departed for Islamabad last Friday, where he met with Pakistani Premier Shehbaz Sharif, Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir, and Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaqdar. Araghchi then flew to Muscat on Saturday and met with Sultan Haytham bin Tariq and Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi, who mediated between Tehran and Washington in 2025 by hosting rounds of indirect negotiations, which were halted by Israeli-US attacks last June. He arrived in Russia after visiting Pakistan on Sunday for a second time and is scheduled to meet the Russian President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Expressing satisfaction with the visit to Islamabad and Muscat, Araghchi said that meetings in Russia are an opportunity to discuss the latest developments in the war. During his tour of Pakistan and Oman, Iran's top diplomat also held phone calls with his counterparts from Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and France. Local media, quoting Foreign Ministry news releases, said their talks focused on bilateral ties, prospects of ceasefire, and deadlocked negotiations between Tehran and Washington. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting from downtown Tehran for AnewZ.
Well, joining me now from Chongqing is political analyst Alex Reporter-Fi, who has been closely following the diplomatic standoff between Washington and Tehran and the wider regional implications. Alex, welcome. Good to have you with us on the show. Now, from where things stand right now, would you say that we're looking at a genuine pause in the talks, or are the two sides repositioning ahead of the next step?
Well, I think from where things stand tonight, it's more of a calculated repositioning. While the Islamabad talks in mid-April did show some progress, they stalled because, again, the United States continues to demand zero enrichment. And I think that is a red line for Iran's sovereignty. We have seen the Americans with their bomb, bully, and bankrupt of nations. I mean, Tehran is not walking away, but it is making it clear that it is not in the mood to negotiate with a gun to its head. By maintaining the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran is kind of using its potent economic pressure and leverage to ensure that the United States really understands that a pause in diplomacy has a direct daily cost into the millions and potentially billions to the global markets.
Well, Washington says that pressure is necessary, while Tehran is effectively saying pressure kills diplomacy. At this point in time, is there still any realistic path back to the negotiating table?
You know, that's a very good question, and I do believe there is a path here, but it's pretty narrow. I mean, Tehran's official stance here, you know, mentioned by the president, I believe it was on the 26th of April, is that pressure kills diplomacy. And the Iranian condition is diplomacy cannot resume while the United States counter blockade remains in place. I mean, the economic reality here with the prices of oil, I think we saw Brent crude surge past $120 a barrel. The global oil production has been dropped by 10 to 15 million barrels a day. We are seeing, oil shock, and that's pretty tough. And, the path back is being paved by international desperation. It's not just the Americans that are in negotiations here. It's the entire Middle East that are pressuring the Americans, saying, you know what, we can't wreck our economies because you want to wreak havoc in the Middle East. You know, the U.S. recently issued limited sanction exemptions, but for an already loaded barrels, suggesting that even Washington realizes the current pressure is backfiring. They're going to have a global catastrophe on their hands here, and the economy is going to nosedive.
Alex, you've touched upon one of the main sticking points, the right to enrich uranium. Now, how much of all of this is about those policies, and how much of it would you say is politics, especially with Donald Trump now facing domestic pressure?
Well, he is facing pressure. I mean, what makes it important for the average American is that they can put food on the table and gas in their car. Now, you got gasoline that's at $4 a gallon late March. April could go to $5, $6, maybe even $7 by mid-May. Trump is caught between his, I think we all know about his America First promise, but and his forever wars. He built his platform on that, and that's what he got reelected on. Now, this is pretty difficult. He's got a lot of people in his base, a lot of influencers that backed him in his election have walked away from him. Really big notable names like Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson. I mean, the U.S. they're demanding Iran stop enrichment for 20 years. Now, Iran has, I think, politely come to the table and understood that if they walk away from their ambitions, which at present they say they're not ambitions to have a nuclear warhead, but they have full rights to enrich uranium, they're saying, okay, we're going to counter this with a 5-year counteroffer. And America's saying, well, you know what, we're not going to do that either. So I think the real pressure here comes with the midterm elections. If we see oil shock continue, and that is a very, very realistic thing. I mean, the last VLCC ships have pretty much unloaded their oil in the refineries, and there's nothing coming for a long time. We've got to remember that the average tanker goes about as fast as a bicycle. So if you're going to be riding a bike from the Middle East to the shores of the United States, it's going to take a long time.
Well, obviously, as you've mentioned, Washington and Tehran are not the only actors here. Now, if diplomacy between them stalls completely, what would you say that means for the wider region, particularly for these energy routes, all these Gulf allies and military calculations?
I mean, a terrific question, and I think a lot of people should be asking that. I think a total collapse in diplomacy, would trigger much more dangerous phase than we're already in here, especially for the Middle East region. I mean, these are energy routes that are badly needed for 20% of the oil production. I mean, we've seen the United States go and use, between 200 to 400 million barrels of oil of their emergency fund to keep the oil prices down. But we are seeing different prices in the speculative derivatives market, which is paper oil trades, and then the the actual spot crude on what it's landing at, and it's coming in at about a 30% premium or even 40% premium. Now, the Strait of Hormuz, which normally handles 20 global market, currently is only seeing about 5% of its actual traffic. And I mean, a permanent stall would cement this disruption. Iran knows exactly what they're doing here. If this keeps it up, we're talking $200 barrel oil. You know, Iran has already demonstrated its capability with counterstrikes on the U.S. bases. And the closure of the strait, I tell you, without a diplomatic off-ramp, we risk a serious shift, guys, from limited strikes to a full-scale regional conflict involving energy, infrastructure, Middle East. Countries like Qatar, UAE are facing existential threats. 93, get this, guys, 93 to 96% of their LNG exports are currently stranded. Go figure. See if you can run an economy when your bottom line is pretty much wiped out.
Well, having all of that in mind, would you say that in the heads of the decision makers in both capitals that this is a temporary freeze in peace talks, or could they maybe be thinking of this as the start of a much more dangerous phase with all of that you've mentioned?
You know, these temporary freezes don't do anything. I mean, this just isn't a freeze. This is in an absolute isolation. And it's a perma-freeze, which has reverberations around the entire Earth here. I mean, we are pretty much in a landlocked situation here with oil. Oil is connected to everything, and everybody uses it on a day-to-day basis, not just to gas up their cars, but in very many other sectors. We may see a food crisis happen here very quick in the next 60 to 90 days. Now, the Americans, they talk about, oh, we have, you know, we export so much oil, we can survive. Well, no, you can't, because they may export 4.2 million barrels a day, but they actually import 6.2 million barrels of oil a day. Now, why is that discrepancy? Well, America does have different types of oil. It's more of a chemistry thing here. They have a lot of fracking oil. That can't be pretty much, put through and made back into gasoline or other oil products because they don't have the infrastructure to do that. So they export that. Now they need the stuff that their refineries in Louisiana can pretty much refine. And it's a difficult position. So much harder for the Americans to get out of this one. They have actually put the entire global economy at risk here. A freeze, that's not a solution. I think even if tomorrow morning everything was settled, we're going to feel this for years to come.
Well, just today amid this freeze, we saw Iran's top diplomat in St. Petersburg meeting Russia's Vladimir Putin. According to the Iranian Foreign Ministry, Arakchi told Putin that U.S. destructive habits and unreasonable demands are slowing down the diplomatic progress. Now, when you take into account that the possibility of these negotiations faltering, what is Tehran's message here with coming to speak with Putin? What's the main driver here? Is it the alliance that might broaden? What would you say it is?
Well, I think it can take some advice from Russia how to keep your economy going when you've been under 20 separate sanctions from the Europeans and the entire world, when your banking system's been cut off by SWIFT, when Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and every American enterprise has vacated the country, and your citizens are blocked from even traveling. I think Russia's got some great advice for Iran. And another thing is, yes, it is to allies. It's allies. Same with China. And you put these three together, they are long what the world needs. Does the world need oil right now? You better believe it. Does it need natural gas? You better believe it. And does it need things that Russia has, infrastructure, support? The Chinese have an amazing banking system and a currency that is now being used by Iran to do transactions. So these global three here are quite interesting. They have been actually pushed into the arms of each other not because of they have any bad intentions, because America has set the stage for this. And this is what happens when you bully, bankrupt, and try to bust a company or a country up. They're going to go with their allies, and exactly this is what's happening. And Russia is willing and waiting for Iran to come, and get ready. It's going to be some interesting months ahead.
Alex, thank you so much for coming on Primetime and sharing your thoughts.
Bye-bye.
All right, we're going to go for a break, and when we get back, we'll be taking a look at how new U.S. tariff threats are raising fresh concerns over Britain's economic security. Don't go away.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. AnewZ is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on AnewZ.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. UK business leaders are warning that Britain is exposed to economic pressure from abroad as new tariff threats from US President Donald Trump add to concerns over trade security. The British Chambers of Commerce said the UK's, quote, inadequate economic security is putting growth and jobs at risk, and is urging the government to create an EU-style trade defense mechanism with powers covering duties, market access, investment checks, and subsidy controls. The call follows Trump's threat to impose a major tariff unless the United Kingdom drops its digital services tax on US technology firms. Well, joining me now from New York City is Earl Carr Jr., founder and chief executive of CJPA Global Advisors, specializing in global markets, geopolitical risk, and international trade strategy. Earl, welcome. Good to have you here with us. Now, when British leaders warn that the country is under economic pressure, or rather it's vulnerable to it, what should we read into this? Is this just a response to the tariff threat, or maybe a signal that the UK is maybe not adjusting to the shifting global trade rules as well as it should?
No, thank you, and it's great to be with you. It's a great question, and I think fundamentally it's much larger and bigger than tariffs. When British business leaders warn about vulnerability to economic pressure, what they're really talking about is a shift from rules-based trade to power-based trade. So tariffs are not just the most visible tool, but behind them is a world where large states are fundamentally more willing to weaponize market access, standards, data rules, and investment flows to pursue essentially political goals. So for a mid-sized economy like an open economy like the United Kingdom, that's a fundamentally structural vulnerability, not just a passing kind of scare.
Well, when we take a look at these latest threats from the U.S. president regarding the digital services tax, would you say that's perhaps a part of negotiating tactics to get some sort of a new deal with the UK, or maybe it signals the start of a broader trade confrontation?
No, it's a great question, and I think it starts negotiation. It starts as negotiation pressure, but it sits inside a fundamentally broader confrontation. So on the surface, President Trump is using tariffs as essentially leverage to protect U.S. tech firms and extract concessions on the digital services tax, but the tone and timing linking it to wider grievances in the relationship demonstrate that this isn't a narrow tax dispute. It's really part of a pattern. The U.S. is signaling that its allies adopt policies Washington dislikes, but it's prepared to respond with blunt economic force, even at the cost of political friction.
Now, as we speak, the royals' state visit to the U.S. Is about to get underway. Do you maybe expect King Charles to try and mend ties with Washington, and why not Trump himself?
I think the visit right now, I hear, has been pushed back a little given the incident with gunfire in Washington. But I think fundamentally this is about building and maintaining transatlantic relationships at a very fraught time right now in geopolitical relations. I think the King and Queen's visit is very much aligned with trying to just maintain some modicums of stability between the United States and the UK. And I think more of it as kind of a diplomatic overture as opposed to, real negotiation on any key geopolitical issues.
Well, the United Kingdom relies heavily on trade with the United States. How much exactly does Washington really have in terms of leverage over London when it comes to these practical economic terms?
No, it's once again, great question. I think Washington has significant economic leverage, but it's not unlimited. And what do I mean by that? So the United States is one of the United Kingdom's largest trading partners. It's a fundamentally key investor, and it's a central player in the United Kingdom's financial and security ecosystem. Targeted tariffs on sensitive sectors or regulatory pressure on finance and tech, of course, would hurt the UK economy. However, at the same time, the UK isn't powerless. It has its own markets, it has its own regulatory influence, and alternative trading partners, such as China. And we've seen the United Kingdom pivot to relying more on economic trade with countries like China when they want to use that as economic leverage vis-a-vis the United States. So to come back to your question, in a direct bilateral standoff, the asymmetry is real. The United States can fundamentally inflict more pain on the UK economy than the UK can on the US, and both sides know this.
We are hearing calls for Britain to build stronger economic defense tools similar to the EU's anti-coercion mechanism, infamously nicknamed the trade bazooka. Would you say at this stage that's a realistic option for London? Or maybe it's coming too late?
No, it's once again, great question. And we haven't had enough discussion about this, I think, broader in Europe and in the United States. I was in London about 3 weeks ago, and there was a lot of discussion about how the UK should kind of play this card. To answer your question, it's realistic and far overdue, but I don't think it's too late. The United Kingdom can absolutely build a more coherent and economic security toolkit, clearer screening of investments, coordinated responses to coercion, and the ability to act with partners when one of them is targeted. What it can't do is fundamentally replicate the European Union's market power on its own. So any British anti-coercion strategy only really works if it's plugged into wider fundamental coalitions, whether with the EU, the G7, or ad hoc groupings. Late, yes. Futile, I would say no.
Earl, at the start of this conversation, you spoke of the shifting rules when it comes to global trade. Are we actually entering an era where trade is no longer about economics first, but that geopolitical power first?
I would say we're already in it. We're already in this era, and trade is still fundamentally about efficiency and growth, but the hierarchy has kind of flipped. We're now focusing more on security, resilience, and strategic advantage. Now kind of sits above pure economic kind of optimism in trade and numbers. We're now focusing a lot more on supply chains that are being fundamentally redesigned around friendshoring and alliances. We're seeing critical technologies are being fundamentally controlled, and market access is being used as kind of leverage in disputes that have nothing to do with tariffs on paper. So for countries like the UK, the challenge is to accept that reality without giving up on openness altogether, using trade to stay connected through ecosystems and alliances, but with a much sharper sense of power and risk.
Power and risk. Earl, thank you kindly for coming on Primetime and sharing your analysis.
Thank you. Great having you.
Now, after a short break, we will be taking a look at the growing strain on the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah as new strikes raise fears of renewed fighting. Stay with us.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Shaken to its very foundation.
Welcome to AnewZ, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. Hi, Candy. One important note to this. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we're reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for AnewZ.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. The ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon is under growing strain as fresh airstrikes and drone attacks raise fears the truce may be unraveling. Civilians are again being told to flee. Military movements are increasing, and the risk of a wider return to fighting is once again in focus.
Smoke was seen rising from southern Lebanon following airstrikes, with Lebanon's health ministry saying 14 people were killed on Sunday, including 2 children and 2 women, and at least 37 others were injured. Earlier, the Israel Defense Forces issued evacuation warnings for several villages, urging residents to leave immediately and warning their lives would be at risk if they stayed. The military also says a 19-year-old Israeli soldier was killed and 6 others wounded in a drone attack by Hezbollah inside Lebanon. Separately, Hezbollah launched 3 drones towards Israel, which the Israeli Air Force says were intercepted before crossing the border. Tensions had already escalated on Saturday when Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the military to vigorously target Hezbollah positions, just 2 days after the ceasefire was extended. At least 6 people were killed in strikes on southern Lebanon that same day. The violence comes despite a ceasefire between the 2 sides that took effect on April the 16th and was extended by 3 weeks last Thursday. Under the agreement, Israel says it retains the right to act in self-defense against imminent threats. Still, on Sunday, Israeli tanks and military convoys were seen moving along the northern border as thick smoke continued to rise across southern Lebanon. Further evacuation orders were issued for 7 towns north of the Litani River, outside the designated buffer zone, with Israel warning it would respond forcefully to what it calls ceasefire violations. Both Israel and Hezbollah have accused each other of breaching the truce since it came into force, underscoring how fragile the situation remains.
Well, joining me now from Beirut is Bahria Ahmar Conti, a journalist and columnist following the latest developments between Israel and Hezbollah and the wider regional fallout. Bahria, welcome. Great to have you on Primetime. Now, this ceasefire was extended just days ago, and now we are already seeing strikes, counter-strikes, military movements. Was this ever an actual truce or just some sort of a temporary limited pause in fighting?
Yes, Andy, unfortunately, it is a break, just a break, because I would like to repeat that according to the terms of the initial deal between Israel and Lebanon, Israel retains its right to take all necessary measures anytime against attacks, and Lebanon must take meaningful steps to prevent Hezbollah and all other non-state armed groups from carrying out attacks against Israeli targets. But we all know that Lebanese armed forces are unable, they cannot take any meaningful steps because it would include disarming Hezbollah. The Israelis will not stop the occupying lands and the shellings, and they will not stop unless Hezbollah is disarmed. And Hezbollah is saying that they will not disarm unless Israel withdraws from the occupied territories. So we are really in a vicious circle, which is what the Hezbollah is saying is not true. In fact, that they will not disarm before Israel withdraws from the occupied territories in South Lebanon, because Hezbollah is receiving orders from Iran, from the guardians of the revolutions in Iran. And all this killing and destruction is related actually to the US-Iran war, as we all know. It's not about defending the Lebanese territory at all. So Iran has invested in Hezbollah for the last 40 years, and now they're getting their return on that investment. And the Lebanese people and the Lebanese state is paying the price for that.
Well, amid this vicious cycle, as you've put it, Israel is now ordering evacuations beyond the agreed zone. Is that perhaps a warning of something bigger coming?
Yes, in fact, it is. We are headed towards more escalation, and that is because Israel wants to occupy more land to extend the buffer zone that it created in South Lebanon on the borders. So they will have a stronger position for the upcoming next talks in Washington. And this is why we need the Americans to really stand by Lebanon because we are in a very weak position. This all started, the ceasefire and the talks were initiated by President Trump when he said one day, enough is enough, no more strikes on Lebanon. And he needs to continue to stand by this position for the next round of talks in Washington in a couple of weeks.
How difficult would you say that this moment is for Hezbollah? What are their options here and choices? Does it respond harder, or if it holds back, does it risk looking weak?
Hezbollah has no problem with any of this. They are screaming against the negotiations, saying no, but in secret they're telling their people to evacuate the villages, to leave. They will continue to send rockets to Israel, what is left of the rockets, because we don't know if they are still receiving rockets from Iran. They will continue to do so, and Lebanese people, Lebanese villages are being destroyed, and Lebanese people and children and journalists are being killed. Hezbollah is already weak because they betrayed the people they promised to protect. They are unable to protect the Lebanese living in South Lebanon. These people are getting killed, they are fleeing their villages, and the villages are being destroyed. So Hezbollah is already weak, but they will continue to send rockets to Israel to maintain their position and to keep their gains, the political gains in the government and in the parliament, the Lebanese parliament.
Does anything feel different this time around? Now, we've seen this pattern before: attack, then retaliation, diplomacy, then temporary truce, then another attack. Is anything, and does anything feel different this time?
Yes, there is a big difference this time. It's because we have a president, the president of the Republic, Joseph Aoun, and the prime minister, who decided to liberate this land that was occupied because of the Hezbollah's attack on Israel. They decided to liberate our territories in the south by negotiating, not by fighting, because we are a small country and we are not strong and we cannot fight Israel and the US. So the difference now is that we are, as a state, engaged in negotiations. We are negotiating our terms, our interests, not the Iranians are negotiating on our behalf. That's a big difference for us. And we, Lebanese, we are all supportive of the Prime Minister and our President to achieve peace.
And Bahria, finally, what would you say is the biggest risk for an escalation? Is it by choice, perhaps, renewed willful attacks, or is it perhaps a mistake as the biggest risk, maybe one misstep, one miscalculation, and suddenly even this kind of ceasefire is over?
There are no mistakes, Andy, in this war. This war has been fought by Hezbollah for the Iranians to use it as a card on the negotiating table. Yes, we are risking a bigger an escalation, more destruction, more killings, but not by mistake. It's planned, and there are talks now that Hezbollah is trying to reach out to Israelis and to the US behind the back of the state, the government, the Lebanese government, to negotiate on his own. So these people are not making any mistakes at all. They are implementing the Iranian agenda, and the Lebanese population is paying the price for that.
We hope to see peace as soon as possible. Bahria, thank you so much for coming on Primetime and sharing your insight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, after a short break, we will be checking in with our correspondents and their stories from across the globe. Stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. AnewZ is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on AnewZ.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption. Welcome to AnewZ, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. Challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabon. One important note to this. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for AnewZ.
Welcome back, you're watching Primetime. King Charles and Queen Camilla are set to begin a landmark visit to the United States, aimed at reinforcing ties between the two allies at a sensitive moment. It comes as security concerns rise in Washington and political tensions continue over foreign policy. Zainab Farajzadeh has more.
King Charles and Queen Camilla's state visit to the United States begins today, in which raise security concerns in Washington after a gunman targeted U.S. President Donald Trump. The 4-day trip marks the first state visit by a British monarch in nearly 2 decades. The last time was in May 2007, when his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, was hosted by President George Bush. It is the most significant overseas visit of the King's reign so far. It coincides with the 250th anniversary of American independence, but is also taking place against a backdrop of political strain between Westminster and Washington. The visit includes a private meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, as well as an address to Congress and the state dinner at the White House. The itinerary also includes visits to New York and Virginia, with a commemoration at the 9/11 Memorial and events honoring shared US and UK military ties. The state visit has already proven diplomatically challenging. It comes just days after a security scare in Washington, where an armed man attempted to breach an event attended by the president, prompting a review of protection measures ahead of the royal trip. At the same time, tensions remain over foreign policy, including disagreements over the conflict involving Iran and reports the US may reconsider its stance on UK sovereignty over the Falkland Islands. Despite these strains, President Trump has expressed strong admiration for the monarchy, suggesting the visit could help repair relations between the two allies. Trump had previously been received by the king during a state visit to the United Kingdom in September 2025. This will be the second state visit hosted by President Trump and the first of his second presidency. Zeynep Farisate, AnewZ, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Turkey's long-running effort to end its conflict with the Kurdistan Workers' Party appears to be facing new obstacles, with fresh questions over whether disarmament is genuinely moving forward. Despite public calls for the group to lay down arms, officials now admit there is little sign of meaningful progress, and wider regional tensions may be complicating the path ahead. Adam Morrow has the details.
Turkish intelligence chief Ibrahim Kalin has told ruling party officials that there has been no meaningful progress in the PKK disarmament process, other than what he called symbolic steps. According to sources within the ruling Justice and Development Party, Kalin briefed party officials over the weekend, saying there was no concrete evidence that the PKK had laid down its weapons. Sources quoted in Turkish media said the organization still exists, adding that there was no material indication of full disarmament on the ground. Designated a terrorist group by Turkey, the United States, and the European Union, the PKK has carried out a deadly armed insurgency against the Turkish state for 4 decades. In recent months, Ankara has promoted a peace and disarmament process aimed at ending the conflict, with imprisoned PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan publicly calling for the group to lay down its arms and disband. However, AK party sources say the group's leadership in northern Iraq has yet to comply with the jailed leader's appeal. Officials also point to the regional war between Iran and the United States, describing it as a complicating factor in the disarmament process. They say the ongoing war has altered the group's expectations and delayed the next phase of the process, including planned legal reforms. One source said they had expected to move into the legal regulation phase this month, but the Iran factor had changed the situation. According to analysts, the coming weeks will be critical in determining whether the stalled process can regain momentum. This is Adam Morrow for AnewZ in Istanbul, Turkey.
Shusha is stepping into a new regional spotlight as the tourism capital of the Economic Cooperation Organization for 2026. The designation puts culture, heritage, and regional connectivity at the center of a wider push to strengthen tourism ties across the region. Chimnaz Shahlar has the story.
Today, an opening ceremony is taking place in Shusha, marking its designation as the tourism capital of 2026 of the Economic Cooperation Organization. The event is bringing together official delegations from across the region, including Azerbaijan, Turkey, Iran, and several Central Asian countries, highlighting growing cooperation in tourism and cultural exchange. Over the coming days, the city will host a number of key events, including a meeting of senior tourism experts experts, a gastronomy day, and a ministerial gathering focused on tourism development. Shusha was named ecotourism capital for 2026 3 years ago, a decision expected to boost tourism in the city. We will be following upcoming events in Shusha in the coming days. I'm Chimnaz Shahlar with Nijat Kasımov for AnewZ.
A meeting in Kabul between Afghanistan's National Disaster Management Authority and the International Organization for Migration focused on strengthening emergency response systems. Discussions also covered improving shelter support and advancing ongoing relief and reconstruction efforts in several provinces. Tamim Bahis has more.
Officials here in Kabul said the meeting between the head of the National Disaster Management Authority, Nuruddin Turabi, and International Organization for Migration Chief Mayhung Park marks a renewed push to scale up disaster preparedness across the country. According to an official statement, both sides highlighted the urgent need to improve emergency assistance, expand shelter support, and strengthen disaster risk reduction programs. Turabi described the IOM as a key partner in construction, preventive projects and emergency relief, while also noting that recruitment of new volunteers is progressing rapidly and expected to be completed soon, with calls for greater support for these teams. He also emphasized the importance of the National Disaster Management Information System, calling it a vital tool in strengthening coordination and community resilience. For her part, Mayhung Park praised the strong cooperation between the two organizations and said she has directed her teams to intensify collaboration, aiming to build a more effective national disaster response mechanism. Park also confirmed that previously stalled projects in Paktia province have now resumed and are expected to be completed soon, while shelter construction for earthquake-affected communities in Kunar province is ongoing. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, AnewZ.
A major new energy deal between Turkmenistan and China is pushing forward one of the world's largest gas projects, deepening a partnership that has become central to regional energy flows. The agreement strengthens Beijing's long-term access to Central Asian gas, while raising fresh questions over how Ashgabat balances its ambitions between East and West. Fariza Kalimurzina has the details.
A $4.6 billion contract has been awarded to China's China Petroleum Engineering to build new infrastructure at the Galkonesh gas field in Turkmenistan. The deal is part of a broader agreement between CNPC and Turkmengas, moving forward the fourth stage of development at one of the world's largest gas fields. The project includes construction of gas processing facilities and the drilling of new production wells. Work is expected to begin this year with completion in just over 4 years. Turkmenistan currently supplies around 30 billion cubic meters of gas to China each year. The new phase is expected to add another 10 billion that will expand flows through the pipeline system that has been operating for more than 16 years across Central Asia. Turkmen officials say the project will be financed from state resources, while the Reuters news agency estimates the total cost could reach $5.1 billion. The deal builds on long-standing energy cooperation between Ashgabat and Beijing. CNPC has been involved in developing Galkonesh since 2009, when it secured access to the field and became one of its key foreign partners. Turkmenistan is also looking beyond China. At the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, Foreign Minister Rashid Meredov said gas exports to Europe remain a priority, with Galkonesh seen as a potential source. And according to the energy consultancy Gaffney Klein, reserves at the field and nearby structures are estimated at around 27.4 trillion cubic meters. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, AnewZ.
Central Asia is moving ahead with one of its most ambitious joint energy projects in years, as Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan deepen regional cooperation over power security. The Cambarata hydropower project could reshape electricity supply across the region and mark a new phase of economic coordination between the three neighbors. Sevilla Rajapova sent us this report.
Three Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, are preparing to launch the construction of the Cambarata HPP-1 hydropower plant, one of the region's largest joint energy projects. The station will be built on the Navin River in Kyrgyzstan with a capacity of 1,880 to 2,000 megawatts. That is enough to supply electricity to up to 1.5 million households. The president of Kyrgyzstan, Sadyr Japarov, described the project as strategically important during the Regional Ecological Summit in Astana. He said that active negotiations are underway to finalize the agreement with the support of the World Bank and other international financial institutions. The project will cost an estimated $4.2 billion, while the broader financing portfolio with international partners is expected to reach $5.6 billion. From 2026, Kyrgyzstan will cover 34% of the project costs, while Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan will each finance 33%. Electricity generated by the station will be distributed among the three countries according to their shares. The sides also agreed to establish a separate joint stock company in Kyrgyzstan to manage the construction and future operations of the plant. Officials say Cambarata HPP-1 will help reduce seasonal electricity shortages and support long-term sustainable development in the region. It is Sevilla Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, AnewZ.
Fresh tensions are emerging between China and the European Union after Brussels widened its sanctions on Russia-linked trade to include Chinese companies. The move adds a new layer of strain to an already fragile relationship, raising broader questions over trade, sovereignty, and just how far Western sanctions can reach. Mahnoor Makhdoom reports.
China has strongly opposed the European Union's latest Russia-related sanctions that include some Chinese companies, calling the move unfair and politically motivated. A spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China said that these firms are mainly involved in the trade of electronics, machinery, and other commercial goods and have not provided weapons to Russia. Beijing argues that targeting them is an example of the EU applying its laws beyond its own jurisdiction. The sanctions are tied to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, with the EU aiming to block supplies that could support Russia's military capabilities. Some of the Chinese firms listed are accused of exporting so-called dual-use items, such as microchips, industrial equipment, and components that can be used for both civilian and military purposes. This has added pressure on China-EU relations, which are already facing challenges over trade and policy differences. China has called on the EU to reverse the decision and stop targeting its companies, warning that it will take necessary steps to protect their rights and interests. Officials say that the sanctions disrupt normal trade and could harm the general economic cooperation between China and Europe. Mahnoor Makhdoom, AnewZ, Beijing.
All right, after a short break, we'll take a look at all the latest news stories around the world. Stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome to AnewZ, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. One important note to fears. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent,
Almaty, Kazakhstan,
Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul for AnewZ.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. At least 14 people, including children, have been injured in a Russian drone attack overnight on Ukraine's southern city of Odessa. Here's more.
Explosions were heard across Odessa in the early hours as Russian drones targeted the southern port city in a large overnight attack. Ukrainian officials say at least 14 people were injured, including 2 children, after residential buildings and a hotel in the historic city centre were struck.
There was an explosion and my husband came to help me out of bed and I saw blood everywhere.
Odessa, a key Black Sea port for Ukrainian exports, has been repeatedly targeted during the war. Officials say port infrastructure and an energy facility were also damaged in the latest strikes. Ukraine's Air Force reported that Russia launched 94 drones overnight. Most of them were intercepted. On the Russian side, authorities say a worker at the Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was killed in a Ukrainian drone strike. Moscow also claims its forces have taken control of 2 villages in eastern Ukraine, though this has not been independently confirmed.
Russia's foreign ministry says it has summoned Germany's ambassador in Moscow over a meeting in Kyiv between a German lawmaker and Chechen separatist Ahmed Zakayev. Moscow accused the German side of engaging with what it calls a banned terrorist organization. It said the talks amounted to interference in its internal affairs. The ministry also warned Berlin of possible consequences for what it described as hostile actions. The meeting reportedly involved discussions over political cooperation and outreach to Russian immigrants. Zakayev, who lives in exile in London, is regarded by Russia as a wanted figure who is linked to the separatist movement in Chechnya. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development says making the Chernobyl nuclear site safe again after a Russian drone attack could cost at least 500 million euros. The bank president says donors, including the European Union, France and Britain, approved 30 million euros to fund the initial work and technical assessments on the damaged site. Preliminary findings showed corrosion to the steel structure, which could threaten the long-term safety of the protective arch that was completed in 2019.
I'm very happy to see the commitment and the
understanding from all partners participating to this meeting that this will be a shared effort, that this is a global interest to ensure nuclear safety and to cooperate on this issue, and already some first outcome with the signing of this 30 million euros with the Chernobyl plant that will allow preliminary work to stabilize the situation and further study also to prepare for the full-fledged reparation that should be done before 2030 and should start practically by the beginning of 2028.
Turning now to the markets, where energy prices are once again fluctuating, keeping the sector in focus amid ongoing geopolitical tensions. Here's more.
Oil prices have climbed noticeably on Monday as stalled US-Iran peace talks continue to disrupt energy flows from the Middle East and unsettle global markets. Brent crude rose by more than 2% in early Asian trading, briefly hitting a three-week high of around $107.97 a barrel. The gains have added to inflation concerns, with traders now largely ruling out any near-term interest rate cuts. This came after the US West Texas Intermediate crude for June delivery that fell by $1.45, or around 1.5%, to settle at $94.40 a barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange. Meanwhile, liquefied natural gas prices for delivery into Northeast Asia have surged to around $16.70 per million British thermal units, roughly 60% higher than before the conflict began. The moves come as attention remains focused on the Strait of Hormuz, a key global shipping route for energy supplies, which has been disrupted by wider tensions linked to the United States, Israel and Iran conflict. Although a ceasefire has largely paused direct fighting, the broader standoff between Washington and Tehran remains unresolved.
Global gas markets are back under pressure as ongoing supply disruptions in the Middle East drive prices higher. The International Energy Agency is warning that the turbulence could last years.
The International Energy Agency says the global natural gas market has been sharply upended by the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, and that it's triggering a major supply shock and renewed volatility. At the center of the disruption is the Strait of Hormuz, where restrictions on shipping since early March have effectively removed nearly a fifth of the global supply of liquefied natural gas from the market. That sudden squeeze has sent prices climbing. In March, gas prices across Europe and Asia surged to their highest levels since early 2023, reversing months of strong supply growth. Earlier this year, markets were stabilizing. New liquefaction capacity, particularly in North America, helped push global LNG trade up by double digits, while prices dropped significantly through the winter heating season. But that progress has now been undone. The IEA says global LNG production fell by 8% year on year as exports from key producers in the Gulf dropped sharply. Supply losses have only been partially offset by supplies from other regions, but the disruption is now rippling through global delivery chains. Demand for LNG is also slowing down. Higher prices, milder weather, and policy measures are curbing gas use, with Europe seeing a year-on-year decline and Asian buyers turning to alternative fuels where possible. Even so, recent cold snaps across major economies have highlighted a key vulnerability: the continued reliance on a flexible gas supply to back up renewable energy systems. Looking ahead, the outlook remains tight. Damage to liquefaction infrastructure in Qatar is expected to slow the next wave of global LNG expansion, delaying new supply growth by at least 2 years. The IEA estimates this could leave a cumulative shortfall of around 120 billion cubic meters of LNG between 2026 and 2030, prolonging market strain into the latter part of the decade. The agency says the crisis underscores the need for stronger investment across the LNG supply chain and closer coordination between producers and consumers to manage future shocks and stabilize global energy markets.
Otsuchi, a Japanese coastal town still marked by the 2011 tsunami, is now facing a new disaster. Wildfires have been burning for days, pushing firefighters and volunteers to the brink of their limits.
In northeastern Japan, the small coastal town of Otsuchi is once again facing a natural disaster. More than a decade after a deadly tsunami destroyed homes and claimed lives, a fast-moving wildfire is now threatening the community. For 6 days, the blaze has burned over 1,600 hectares of forest. Among those on the front lines is 31-year-old volunteer firefighter Ryota Haga. He was a high school student when, during the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, which swept away his family home. Today, he is battling flames along steep mountain slopes with little rest.
Up to now, I've responded to a few incidents, like forest or hillside fires, but those were cases where the fire could be put out quickly or brought under control in a pretty short time. This is the first time I've encountered a situation where the fire is still not out, even after more than 2 days. Physical fatigue is setting in. The soles of a lot of people's feet are hurting, including mine. After all, we're climbing mountain slopes where there are basically no paths. It's almost like a wall in places.
Around 1,400 firefighters from across Japan have been deployed, along with Self-Defense Force helicopters. Crews are using hoses and portable pumps to fight the fire. Local fire teams are already understaffed, raising concerns about how long they can sustain the fight. For residents here, the wildfire is not just another disaster. It is a test of resilience in a town that has already endured so much.
New figures point to another year of rising military spending worldwide as countries adjust to a more uncertain security environment. Some are expanding defense budgets in response to conflicts, regional tensions, and long-term security plans.
According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, global military spending rose in 2025 to a record $2.89 trillion. A rise of nearly 3%. That's an average of 2.5% of countries' GDP, the highest since 2009. The US remained the largest spender at $954 billion, despite a 7.5% decline linked mainly to the absence of newly approved military assistance for Ukraine. The US, China, and Russia accounted for more than half of the global total. Europe was the main driver of the increase. Spending went up 14% as Russia, Ukraine, and European NATO members raised expenditure. Russia's spending reached $190 billion, while Ukraine's rose by 20% to $84.1 billion, around 40% of its GDP. European NATO members spent a combined $559 billion, led by Germany, whose expenditure rose by 24%. In Asia and Oceania, spending grew by 8.1%, the region's fastest yearly rise since 2009. China remained the second largest spenders, while Japan and Taiwan also recorded sharp increases. The Middle East remained broadly stable. Turkey's spending rose, while Iran's declined in real terms because of high inflation. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute says the trend is likely to continue, with many countries pursuing long-term military spending amid geopolitical uncertainty.
Now to some news from the African continent. Starting on May 1st, African countries with ties to China will benefit from a zero-tariff deal on exports to the country. This comes as Africa's largest trading partner looks to become more competitive with suppliers from other regions.
53 African countries are set to receive zero-tariff treatment on exports to China. The policy, due to take effect on the 1st of May, was first outlined in 2024 by Chinese President Xi Jinping during a summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in Beijing. Officials have welcomed the move, describing it as a win for both sides.
That is significant because it's going to be a win-win partnership for Africa. I think it's a very important opportunity for Africa. China is the biggest market in the world, very lucrative market, very vibrant, and to be able to access that market, I think is going to be extremely important for our industrialization in Africa, for our modernization efforts, but also for us to improve efficiency and effectiveness in our business models and production systems. But also for China, this will be also mutually beneficial.
At a time when global trade is under strain, the move positions Africa more firmly within one of the world's largest consumer markets, where demand continues to grow. China remains Africa's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade reaching approximately $348 billion in 2025. Officials say they hope the zero tariff policy will be sustained.
For us, cashew nuts are our main product. Guinea-Bissau produces over 250,000 tons annually, and we export our cashews to Vietnam and India. So, I'm sure that with zero tariffs, Guinea-Bissau will benefit from exporting cashew nuts to China. And we also have imported a lot of Chinese goods to Guinea-Bissau. So, this will facilitate trade between the two countries, and I hope this policy will continue for Africa and contribute to the development of both sides.
One of the highlights of the deal is that it will cover processed and value-added goods. For decades, Africa's role in global trade was shaped by the export of raw materials. The new policy will help incentivize local processing, making a wider range of goods more commercially viable in the Chinese market.
On the 26th of April, AnewZ premiered a new documentary called Frontline Somalia: Struggle for Sovereignty. The Frontline team traveled to one of the world's most dangerous and fragile regions to examine the reality on the ground and Somalia's struggle for stability and sovereignty. Here's more on the report.
Located on the strategic Horn of Africa along vital maritime routes linking the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean, Somalia holds one of the world's most important yet unstable positions. For more than 3 decades, the country has been associated with piracy, civil war and the enduring threat of Al-Shabaab. Yet behind that image, a deeper battle is underway, the struggle to rebuild institutions, restore authority and defend sovereignty amid rising geopolitical competition. Somalia's struggle for sovereignty was led on the ground by AnewZ frontline team Anastasia Lavrina, Bahruz Gadirov and Ilkin Metiev.
Hello, greetings from Mogadishu, Somalia.
Filming took place during 2 defining moments for the country. Historic local elections held under the principle of one person, one vote for the first time in around 60 years, aimed at moving beyond clan-based politics. And the decision on December 26th, when Israel became the first country to recognize Somaliland, which is internationally recognized as part of Somalia.
The Foreign Ministry of Azerbaijan, which we are very pleased to hear that they have made and express themselves to reaffirm their support for the territorial integrity of Somalia.
The documentary is especially timely as relations between Azerbaijan and Somalia have recently gained momentum. In 2025, Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud visited Baku, followed later that year by a visit from Somalia's foreign minister. This year, Somalia also opened its embassy in Azerbaijan, signaling a new phase in bilateral cooperation. The film is now available across all AnewZ platforms.
Well, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching and tune into Primetime tomorrow as well. From all of us here at AnewZ, have a nice evening.